Hello. I just want to start today's video by saying I love coaching family-based businesses. And one of the reasons is I come from a family-based business and it is a totally unique dynamic. And if you're in one, you know what I mean. And I wanted to at least take a little time to talk about why is it unique and what's going on. And if you are just working for somebody who happens to be in a family business, this will probably be really good for you as well. So there are some pretty big unique challenges with it. And that comes in a different dynamic in the emotions that come up, the relationships, and history that's in there. So I want to take a little bit of time and talk through what this means. The emotions are different because it's a different, I'm gonna say emotions and relationship, they work really well together. And we're going to talk about them as a unit because the emotional side, family members are much more comfortable with each other. There is no boundary of professional and private because all those lines have been blended together. So when you walk into a situation, you're going to have a very different energy when family members are talking to each other. And it can be comfortable or uncomfortable, just depending on what's going on. And sometimes it feels like it's something you can't address, and that it shifts the culture. So it ends up being a really big thing that we have to talk about when we're in a coaching situation of like, what does it mean to work with a family member and how are you guys showing up in front of your employees and what is that like? And sometimes even in front of your customers, clients, and all what that looks like. So that ends up being a really unique piece. And a lot of times you just need to be able to talk about it. As well as I'm going to tap in this other piece, the history that's there. One of my favorite things that I ever heard was, my family pushes my buttons because they installed them. And that's true. Your family has installed sensitive triggers for you, and they know exactly where they are. If something's going on, they know how to push it and send you off, especially maybe not intentionally, in a distraction area so they can go do something else. So just know there's this whole other level of dynamic because there are different boundaries. There are looser boundaries that happen there. So, because of that, I want to talk about boundaries. And that is the biggest part that we need to address when we're talking about family businesses and starting to create a new set of rules of when you're in the office, when you're not in the office. So, just to give you a little bit of background, my mom decided to start a business when I was 3 years old so that she could work from home. So, this was in the 80s. Working from home wasn't quite as much as what it is today. Worked really well for her. My dad was off doing other things. And she was just a freelancer. She was doing graphic design, and advertising and all that kind of that mix of things. But as she became more successful, she started to bring people on. And at that point, not a family business. She is the owner, and it happened to be in our basement, but it had that separation of employee and staff and owner. But at some point my dad decided he didn't want to be in corporate anymore and wanted to be able to create his own business as well. So initially they were two separate businesses, and my mom had hers and my dad had his, but they were both in the same space, and they were both starting to overlap things like using the same accountants, maybe doubling up on some direct mail and marketing at the time. So there was overlap. So that dynamic started there of they are husband and wife working together, and there's people underneath them. And I grew up watching this, so I know exactly what it was like during those time periods. Um, and there's some definite like cringe moments, and it's just part of it of like they're trying to figure out who they are as leaders, and I am as their child watching this, going, "Oh my God, are you serious?" Like that needs to be something you talk about after everybody leaves. Um, and then I decided to join the firm. And I didn't necessarily like, I'm going to come save the day. They had eventually merged their two businesses together. I'm going to make the long story short. Merged their two businesses together. And they had a little bit of a coup and lost some team members right when I was graduating college. And I was starting to go freelance and do design on my own for theater. So it was a kind of adjacent. And I was like, I can come part time and kind of be a gap, bridge a gap for you guys until you get your feet under yourselves. It served me, it served them. It was great. Then this thing called the Great Recession happened, and that changed the entire dynamic of all of that. So that's another video that we can get into later. But this is what really started to happen is because of that, we became a very different type of family business. There were three family business leaders, and we all had our own ideas of what needed to happen. And over time, this became toxic because we wouldn't shut it off. We wouldn't know when to do that. And this is actually the only reason that it started to change was when, well, we were frustrated. Let's start with that. And we got a coach. And a coach helped us work through that process of who's doing what. Where are you overlapping each other? And actually, in some cases, tripling the work that's being done because each one of us was doing it. And I will tell you, we were creating absolute chaos for our staff because they didn't know who to listen to. So I think there was a lot of like duck and cover, they're coming kind of moments. So it was a very powerful thing. That's why boundaries are important to understand what is each one of our roles? What are each one of us doing? And how do we then kindly call each other out and start to make the business a job and not our entire lives. And that's one of the things that we see happen a lot with family businesses where the work feels like it's every part of your life and not having that being able to put it down. You need to be able to put the work down to go rest, to come back fresh with new ideas. So that's a big piece of how family businesses are complicated because that emotional, that relationship and that history piece of it. And then let's go ahead and throw in the elephant in the room of nepotism. And this happens. It's just part of the family dynamic of you're not typically going to fire a family member, but sometimes you actually need to. And one of the things that you also need to consider, having worked with a lot of family businesses, is it's hard to leave sometimes because you truly care about these people. But that's sometimes when the nepotism becomes even greater because they don't know how to quit or somebody won't let them quit. But also, it can go both ways. I've seen the typical nepotism of the children are just riding their parents' tailcoats. I've also seen it the other way around, as when a strong younger leader comes along, that the parent or the elder or the aunt, the grandparent, whatever the dynamic is, I've seen it in a lot of different ways, where they start to the elder backs down and rides the coattails of the younger. So there's a different dynamic that you really do have to start to address. And a lot of times it's just starting to talk about it and saying, hey, okay, what do we need to do to preserve our relationship as family members? And then really make sure we're doing the right thing for the business moving forward. I recently came across this amazing quote from Adam Grant that just, I think, epitomizes so much because what happens so often in a family business is we start calling our staff family members. We did it. And I will tell you, we consciously decided to stop doing that. And now we're a team because team members are selected. But Adam's quote was, "Dear manager, a company is not a family. Parents owe kids unconditional love. Most companies only offer at-will employment. A leader's job is not to show daily affection. It is to give people pay and purpose, support their success, and care about their well-being." And I think this is a beautiful way to establish boundaries. It's as simple as that. That's like 4 sentences to say, what are we doing as a boss versus what are you doing as a family member? I think this is a great piece to think about when you're talking about what is your relationship with family members within the business. So, as I said at the beginning, I love working with family businesses because it is so many unique layers that you don't necessarily get in other business. I enjoy other businesses as well, don't get me wrong on that, but and it's probably just because it's near and dear to my heart and that it doesn't have to be toxic. It can be a really healthy place. But it's coming in and starting to figure out how do you balance the family dynamic in a way that makes a great business that supports your life.